The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gam Podcast Network is brought to you by Rock Fantasy. Play their fantasy pick'em for a chance to win 100 times your money in NBA, MLB, NHL, golf, and more. Sign up today using promo code SGPN to get 100% deposit match. We're also brought to you by the premier arbitrage sports betting tool, Avo. Use their tool to bet both sides and to lock in a profit. Access their platform for free at arbsverseodds.com. That's ARBSVSODDS.com. Plus, in honor of Masters Week, the Golf Gambling Podcast guys are giving away a tailor-made Spider X putter for free. Enter at sportsgampodcast.com/masters. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gam Podcast Network. It's currently early Wednesday morning, roughly midnight on April 10th. I'm your host, as always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to preview the second round of the Monte-Carlo Masters. I am aware the second round did technically start, but there's still a lot of matches to talk about, so we're going to talk about some of them that are taking place on Wednesday morning. But before we continue that, I do want to remind everybody to like and subscribe on YouTube. Also, a reminder that the podcast is still on Spotify and Apple, and if you still listen to the podcast that way, don't forget to rate and review. A reminder, we also have merch on the SGPN merch store because we do have shirts, we have mugs, a lot of great ways to support the show, a lot of high-quality merchandise, not just for this show, but also for the other podcasts with the network, 20-plus podcasts that focus on gambling, all for free. And a reminder that the featured show of the week is actually going to be the Golf Gambling Podcast, because in honor of Masters Week, the Golf Gambling Podcast guys are giving away a tailor-made Spider X putter. Enter for free at sportsgampodcast.com/masters. Now, before we get into the actual preview and picks for the second round, do want to actually recap what happened in the first round, both for the outrights and for some news. The outrights so far have done pretty well for us, so we'll get into that in a second. But I got to recap the actual lock and dog picks from the first round. Overall, not good. Unfortunately for us, did lose a heartbreaker on both the lock and the dog. Ended up having Moutet on the money line at minus 144 against Papiron. Won the first set, then ended up losing the next two as he lost in three. For the dog, ended up having some chances with the second set because Jari actually had, I think it was love 40, and there was one game there where they were on serve, but Jari had, I think it was 5 or 6 break points. Blew them all. Echeverry broke him the next game. Jari broke back, and then eventually Jari got broken, serving at 5-5. So he had a shot at it, but unfortunately did not get there because Jari, I believe, went 1 for 11 on breakpoint chances. It was either 1 for 9 or 1 for 11. But the point is he could not convert any great chances that he had, and Echeverry ended up beating him in straight sets. So I picked up a loss there with the dog as well. As for the outrights, though, so far so good, because the main, I'd say, hot take that I had from the outrights episode, I said that I was going to fade Alcaraz because there were some reports that his arm was bothering him, and I thought that he was definitely overvalued because of the potential injury he was dealing with, and it turns out the arm injury was so bad that Alcaraz withdrew from the event, so he ended up not playing a single match, and as a result, our outrights look really good because we faded Alcaraz altogether. So in his actual quarter, we have Ruud and Hurkacz. Hurkacz did win his first round match in 3 sets against Draper. But the point is all of our outrights are still alive and Alcaraz is not there. So we have a pretty good chance of cashing something into this tournament. So I wanted to mention that as the main breaking news element of tennis. It was Alcaraz getting injured and end up withdrawing. I believe there's some reports he might miss Barcelona too. So I don't know how injured he actually is. We'll see. Point is, though, not a good sign for Alcaraz, who has battled some injuries, various injuries, over the last year or two. Now to actually get into the recap of the tournament so far, going to go day by day. So technically the tournament did start on Sunday as it overlapped with the final matches in Marrakech, in Estoril, and in Houston. So the point is we were focusing on those matches. Didn't exactly have time to recap the matches in Monte Carlo, but now we can. So starting off with the first round, you ended up seeing Struff come back from a 6-1 loss in the first set to Baez, and he ended up winning that match in 3. I believe Baez was serving it out in the second set, and he choked it, and then Struff did win in 3. Griekspoor won a marathon as he ended up beating Kempfer in 3 as well. Bublik showed up for Clay in, I'd say, physical form, but not in mental form, because Bublik absolutely basically punted the match. George killed him 1-6, 1-6-1. There was a fun moment where Bublik just gave the racket to a ball girl and just let her play a point. The ball girl double faulted, which is unfortunate for her. But the point is, Bublik was not taking it seriously. He was in good spirits, but he got his ass kicked, and George did win in straight sets. And Musetti pulled off an upset as he beat Fritz in the first round. We ended up giving out Musetti as an outright pick for the quarter after that match. So we did factor it in, but we never actually talked about it specifically on this podcast. So those were the matches on Sunday. Now, as for Monday, you had a lot of added matches on the card. You had Felix beating Nardi in straight sets. Offner beat Evans in straight sets. Pyron ended up beating Mutet in 3. Nagal won a marathon against Arnaldi. That was probably the best match of the day. Cerundolo beat Altmaier in straight sets. Dimitrov did win in straight sets as well. Degir got injured and retired midway through the second set. He was going to lose to Tsitsipas anyway. Tabilo beat O'Connell in straight sets. Fees won a match, ended up beating Hanfman in straight sets with a bagel in there in the first round. Gashanov beat Nori in a competitive 7-5, 7-6. Safulin kind of surprised everyone and beat Munar in the first round. And Humbert beat Coria in 3 sets, coming back from 1 set down. Moving on to the matches from yesterday. Agut ended up beating Diaz Acosta in straight sets. Korda beat Fekina in straight sets. That was kind of a surprising outcome. Not Korda winning, but the margin. 6-1, 6-2 was an absolute destruction. I don't think anybody thought Korda would win that badly. I thought it would be a competitive match, but 6-1, 6-2 is one-way traffic. So good win for Korda. Zhang beat Giron in 3 sets. De Minaur ended up beating Wawrinka with a bagel in the second set. Hurkacz won his marathon match against Draper as he ended up winning 7-6 in the third set. I believe he was also serving it out in the third set and ended up choking it away, but eventually got the job done in the breaker. Berrettini ended up winning in Marrakech, and then he completely had nothing left in the tank because he got killed by Kikmanovic as he lost 6-3, 6-1. Echeverry ended up beating Jari in straight sets. Djokovic came back and killed Safulin. I believe he had a break point in every single return game, so he was phenomenal. So I do think that Djokovic, once again, looks like he's in great form, and we'll see if that can continue moving forward because he has a matchup against Musetti taking place in the third round, which should be pretty fun. Moving on, you ended up having Vukic fill in as a last-second replacement for fellow countryman Thompson, and Vukic played very well. Ended up winning the first set with a tiebreak, 9-7 scoreline. Then he lost the next 2 sets, 6-3, 7-5 to Monfils. Fun match, though. Vukic gave it a run for a last-second lucky loser, and unfortunately for him, he came up just a bit short. Zverev beat Offner. A good start for us because we have Zverev to win the actual tournament at about 16-1 as he won in straight sets. Struff ended up beating Chorch in straight sets, and Musetti ended up beating Fees in straight sets as well. So that basically does it for the actual recap of the matches yesterday. Not many shockers. It's been pretty much a chalk fest so far in this event. The main surprise was Alcaraz getting injured, but Djokovic came back. He looked solid. De Minaur looked solid. Pretty much everybody looked good, and we'll see if that continues here on Wednesday. Now it's time to actually get into the preview for the Wednesday matches. So a reminder, since there are a lot of matches on the card, we are not going to cover all of them, but I am going to cover the matches that catch my eye. So just keep that in mind, just going through the actual card on Wednesday. So starting off with a pretty entertaining matchup between Griekspoor and De Minaur. De Minaur is a decent favorite at -210. Griekspoor's +180. As for the actual game spread, De Minaur is -3.5, and Griekspoor's +3.5. The over-under is set at 22 games. Now, looking at this overall matchup, should be interesting because De Minaur is obviously better on clay, but Griekspoor's actually had the head-to-head advantage against De Minaur recently. So I think that can maybe throw a wrinkle into things. He is up 2-1, and Griekspoor has won each of the last 2 meetings. But you had one match in Basel on hard court last year. You also had a grass court matchup, in 2023. So the point is they never faced off on clay. So it's going to be interesting for Griekspoor, who had a marathon against Kempfer. But Wawrinka is still a pretty good clay player, and De Minaur beat him 6-3, 6-0. I do think De Minaur gets it done. I'm not sure if he wins in straight sets or in 3, but I do think he gets it done. So I am going to lean to De Minaur in there. Maybe a parlay piece if you do like the -210. Moving on to the next matchup, you have a pretty fun one between Felix and Sonego. Sonego, a lucky loser. I believe Felix was supposed to face off against Alcaraz, who of course got injured, and now Sonego took his place. Sonego did lose in qualifying to Bautista Agut in 3 sets. but now he was given a second life and a chance to potentially pull off the upset here. Now, they faced off 3 times in their careers, and Felix is 2-1. None of the meetings, I should say none of the recent meetings, were on clay. The first meeting was in Hamburg in 2020, and Felix did win in straight sets, 6-2, 7-6. Very dated, though. Not sure if that matters. Felix, though, decent favorite here, about -190, and Sonego around +165. For game spread, Felix -2.5, and Sonego +2.5, and the over-under is set at about 22.5 or 23. I'm going to have to lean to Felix in this one. I'm not going to bet it because I can't stand putting money on Felix. But Sonego did lose in qualifying, and he's really not been in good form recently. We saw him lose in Markic pretty early on, beating Nagal in 3, despite losing the first set 6-1. And then Berrettini ended up beating him 6-3, 7-6. Point is, both guys can't really be trusted, but I think Felix is in better form. He looked good in the first round against Zanardi. That's good enough for me. I'll lean to Felix in this spot. Moving on to the next match we're going to talk about. We are going to save a couple matches for the end of the show, so keep that in mind. But I do want to talk about the Etcheverry match against Tsitsipas, because I find this match kind of intriguing. So Tsitsipas is a decent favorite, as he's around -260. Etcheverry's around +220. As for the game spread, Tsitsipas -3.5 and Etcheverry +3.5. Over-under is set at 22.5. Now, Etcheverry looked really good against Jari in the first round. So did Tsitsipas, as he faced off against De Gier. De Gier, though, did get upset in the last event he was in, and he was one of the favorites to win the event. So De Gier was clearly not playing his best tennis, and I do think Tsitsipas capitalized on it. Do I trust Tsitsipas? Absolutely not. I think he's more talented than Etcheverry, but I think Etcheverry can keep this match interesting. I might consider the over in this match, maybe the games for Etcheverry, but De Gier lost in the first round to Fognini in Markic, and he was one of the favorites. So I don't want to say De Gier's a lost cause, but he's been in really bad form. So it's not obviously Tsitsipas' fault that he got matched up against the opponent that was struggling. But the point is, I do think that Tsitsipas' win might be a little bit overrated. And I think Etcheverry's win against Jari was still impressive in straight sets. I'll lean to the +3.5. Maybe you'll get a 7-6, 6-4. Maybe you'll end up seeing Tsitsipas cover with a 6-4, 6-4. You get the point, though. Maybe it'll go either way based on the spread. But I think Etcheverry can do enough to hang in there. And I do think that his game can wear down Tsitsipas over long rallies. So we'll see what happens, but I am going to lean to the dog there at a pretty decent price. Moving on to the next match, you have Sinner taking on Korda. Now, Sinner is a decent favorite. A Sinner is about -750. Korda is +550. As for the game spread, Sinner -5 and Korda +5. Over-under is set at 20.5. Now, Sinner was one of my picks to win the event, mainly because he's in great form, and he's the best player in the world right now. But we do know that clay is its weakest surface, so I am curious how he's going to look in this matchup. They have faced off 2 times in their careers. One time last year, Korda did win in Adelaide in straight sets, and they faced off in Washington in 2021, and Sinner did win in back-to-back tie breaks. Now, no meetings on clay. Korda did kill Fokina in the first round. Sinner has not played a clay match in a long time, at least in singles. He did have a doubles match with Sonego, and he lost in the final set 10-7. So I think for this one, I actually am going to lean to Korda plus the 5. Everyone knows on the show that I can't stand Korda. I think he's a head case, and I think that he is mentally weak. But 5 games is a lot for a guy that has not played a singles clay match in a long, long time. I think Korda can hang in there. The head-to-head's close, and I do think that Korda has the game to at least make Sinner work for it. I'm not saying Korda's going to win, but I do think that Sinner will win, but keep it relatively, I'd say, dicey at times. I think he might end up winning with a breaker in there, maybe a 7-6, 6-4, something like that. But 5 games is a bit much for me, in my opinion. So I am going to lean to Korda plus the 5 in this matchup. Moving on to the next matchup, you have Agut taking on Hurkacz. Hurkacz is about -234 on the money line. You have Bautista Agut at around +194. As for the game spread, Hurkacz -3 is about even money, and Bautista Agut +3 is about -122. Over-under is set at 23 flat. Now, in the head-to-head, Agut has gotten the better of Hurkacz, but some of those wins were dated. We know that Agut is kind of past his prime at this point, despite looking sharp in the first round of this event against the likes of Diaz Acosta after going through qualifying. But Hurkacz has been in good form, won his first ever clay title in Estoril. Then he ended up beating Draper in 3. In the head-to-head, though, you're looking at Agut being up 3-2. So Agut has gotten the better of him, but 2 of the wins were before 2021. In fact, Agut did lead 3-0 in the head-to-head before Hurkacz won the last 2 meetings, including a straight set win in Paris. Now, they never faced off on a surface that's not hard court, so maybe the surface change will help out Agut. I'm going to lean that way. I think that even though Hurkacz is the better player in terms of talent, he's played a lot of tennis. You win a full tournament in Estoril, then you barely have any time off. He had 1 day off in between the final in Estoril and the first round against Draper, and that match was a marathon. I think Agut can cause the rallies to get very long and very physically demanding, and I think that Hurkacz might struggle with the stamina in this matchup. So I am going to lean to Agut, maybe on the money line, but I do think that Hurkacz is vulnerable in this spot, and I think these odds are basically off. So moving on to the next match, trying to think of which one I want to talk about. Decent amount of good matchups on the card. So I think for the next one, once again, not going to cover all of the matches, going to save a couple for the end of the show. I'm going to talk about Monfils taking on Medvedev, and for this one, Medvedev's a decent favorite, as Medvedev is around minus 250, give or take, and Monfils around plus 210. As for the actual game spread, Medvedev minus 3.5 is minus 110. Monfils plus 3.5 is minus 110 as well. Over-under is set at 22 flat. Now, I mentioned before, Monfils did win a very close matchup against the lucky loser in Vukic, as he won in 3. Medvedev, though, has not played a clay match in a long time. Played a doubles match and lost in straight sets in Monte-Carlo. So, once again, that doesn't really tell me anything. But the point is, Medvedev played 1 doubles match as his tune-up for the singles in Monte-Carlo. He won a clay title last year, a Masters 1000 title. But the point is, I do think Monfils can make this interesting. Now, the head-to-head might be a bit intriguing, just based on the fact that you're looking at the head-to-head being pretty competitive. In fact, Monfils won 2 of the last 3 meetings. They never faced off on clay. Medvedev won the first meeting in Sofia back in 2019. Then Monfils got revenge in Rotterdam in 2019, winning in 3. And they faced off in Indian Wells in 2022, and Monfils did win in 3. I'm going to lean to the over in this one. I think that even though Medvedev is the better player, we know that clay is his worst surface, despite the clay title he had last year. I think 3.5 is a lot of games. I think Monfils can be comfortable on the clay. The concern is potential stamina, because he had a marathon against Vukic with no time off in between. But Medvedev might be rusty on the clay, so it's kind of a battle of fatigue versus rust. And I do think that Monfils can definitely get the job done, at least based on covering this number. For reference, the match did take 3 hours against Vukic on Tuesday, but the match only took about 2 hours, so not many long points per se, a lot of quick points, which is mainly because Vukic has a big serve. But I think for the sake of this matchup, I am going to lean to Monfils plus the games. I want to see how Medvedev looks on clay, and I think Monfils can turn this match into a war, so I am going to lean to the dog in this spot. Then that's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual match previews. Of course, I mentioned before, I do have a couple of matches that I have not talked about yet, and I'm saving them for the lock and dog picks. So, time to move on to those lock and dog picks. But before we get to any of that, I do want to take a quick word from our sponsor. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the place to play fantasy sports because it is the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. They have great pick'em games. For example, you can pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total into their upcoming games. You can win up to 100 times your money in a single night. Pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. And you can also make rivals picks, which pits 2 players against each other, so you can pick which player you think might have more points, for example, in an NBA game. But a reminder that you should also join Underdog Fantasy because they have a lot of very fun markets for tennis. They have, for example, breaks of serve. They have aces. They have a lot of fun tennis options to make matches more interesting, and I recommend you joining the platform in order to take advantage of those opportunities. So sign up today with promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them on the App Store, and don't forget to register with the promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Must be 18 plus and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concern with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org. We're also proud to partner up with Ava, the premier sports betting arbitrage tool. If you're new to arbitrage sports betting, it's pretty simple. Basically, betting both sides of a bet at two different sportsbooks to lock in a profit. The Avo tool scans the sportsbooks, looking for discrepancies in the odds, and then they tell you how much money you need to place in order to actually make any expected profit. The tool is super easy to use and lightning fast because speed is a big part of arbitrage sports betting. The best part of Avo is that it's currently free to use without restrictions. That's right, completely free. Get started today at arbsverseodds.com. That's arbsvsodds.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing some of the second-round matches taking place on Wednesday. Now it's time to move on to the actual lock and dog picks. Forgot to make an announcement earlier in the show. I've officially removed Dimitrov from the banned list. We knew that. I mentioned that a couple of months ago. However, I did add somebody to the list. Jari, I've officially added to the banned list. I just can't handle it anymore. Watching him hit unforced error after unforced error drives me nuts. But I wanted to make that announcement. I will not be taking Jari on the podcast until further notice. But since Dimitrov is officially off of the banned list, I am going to take him as part of the lock. I am going to go with a two-pick moneyline parlay. I am going to go with Rublev on the money line, parlayed with Dimitrov on the money line, and that is going to pay out at minus 132 on the two-pick parlay. So first reason for Rublev against Papiron. I know I faded Papiron in the first round, and he made me suffer for it because he ended up beating Mutet in 3. Point is, though, Rublev is a much better player, and he's the defending champion, so I think he should be comfortable here in Monte-Carlo. Both guys love to showcase their firepower, but Rublev's more consistent. So with similar, styles of play, I think Rublev's better at it by a wide margin. So I just question how Papiron's going to get the job done in this matchup. So I'm going to lean to Rublev in this spot on the money line as the first leg of the lock. Second leg is going to be Dimitrov, even though Kekmanovic did beat Berrettini in straight sets convincingly in the first round. Berrettini was absolutely gassed. We know that he had been playing a bunch of tennis, and we know that he was battling injuries for a while. So now he went to Murikic, won a title, and then immediately played in Monte Carlo. He clearly had nothing left in the tank, and I just think that Kekmanovic took advantage of a very favorable scheduling spot for him compared to his opponent. Now, Kekmanovic, if you include that win against Berrettini, has still lost 4 of his last 5 matches. He really has not been good for the last couple weeks. Dimitrov has been great. If you want to talk about consistency, he's been one of the most consistent players on tour the entire year, and he has been making solid run after solid run. And Dimitrov, to get into his recent form, has won 6 of his last 7 matches. So I like the form he's in. I think he is definitely the better player than Kekmanovic. He can throw in some slices, throw in some different looks at Kekmanovic to keep him off balance. And Dimitrov, once again, is a player whose style of play does translate pretty well to every surface. But simply put, I think that Rublev and Dimitrov are better players than their opponents. I think they should win this. I should say they should win their respective matches to help us cash this parlay. So once again, the lock for the show is going to be on Rublev and Dimitrov moneyline and a two-pick parlay at minus 132. For the dog, I am going to go to a matchup between Khachanov and Cerundolo. I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets at plus 135. The head-to-head's been competitive between the two of them, as 2 of the 3 head-to-head meetings have gone to a deciding set, and Cerundolo has been a bit of a 3-set magnet as he's gone to a deciding set in 4 of his last 5 matches. The one exception was the first round in Monte Carlo against Altmaier, but Altmaier has been struggling recently with his form, and his fitness has always been an issue. So I do think that he had a pretty favorable draw in the first round. Point is, though, we ended up seeing Khachanov almost go to 3 sets against Nori, so I do think that he can definitely outlast Cerundolo over the course of this matchup. But both guys, I think, can be a bit streaky at times. I see a lot of baseline rallying, and I do think each player can have moments in this matchup to succeed in. So I am going to lean to the over 2.5 sets as well. I just think you're looking at a spot where this should be a very competitive match where it could go either way, but I think it ends up going to a third set. So once again, my picks for the show, the lock's going to be on Rublev and Dimitrov moneyline at minus 132 and a parlay. And for the dog, I am going to go with Khachanov and Cerundolo over 2.5 sets at plus 135. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. A reminder, for the next episode, we'll cover the third round of Monte Carlo. Until next time, though, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show the MLB show, the NFL show, and also a reminder that the WNBA is starting up in about a month or so. So Terrell and I will be back for that. But until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.